Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Great Engine Opening series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we're bringing together lots of stuff that we've been doing in the past number of videos. Now I'm sure that you've all been following the series on the great Italian player Sergio Mariotti. You certainly should have done if you haven't. And well, the first video in that series was an absolutely wonderful game, a wonderful hack by Sergio Mariotti against the great Svetozar Gligoric in 1969. And it was from a King's Indian 4 pawns attack where Mariotti turned that into an absolute avalanche, starting with g4 in this position. Well, I was looking at it with the engines, as I do. And one thing that really struck me was Torch's suggestion of the move h4 in this position. And it's incredibly dangerous. It's only ever been played twice, I think. And, well, I think it could give black players a big shock. So let's have a look how it turns out. It's from the 4 pawns King's Indian, and we'll have a look at what Torch has to offer us. So the game, we arrive at the position after d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6 and f4. And c5, d5 castles is one move order. You could also play castles and then this move bishop e2, very important, c5, d5. Now this move bishop e2, that's Mariotti's own kind of wrinkle. And very important because it gives white a number of interesting extra possibilities. So after e6, Mariotti took on e6, and there's a great book on 1d4 by Moskalenko. And he looks at a lot of d takes e6 systems with a knight on f3 rather than the bishop on e2. But he makes a very good case for them. Glenn Fleer, English Grandmasters, played them a lot as well. And this is just a Mariotti Torch wrinkle on the whole thing. Black's most natural move is to take with the f-pawn on e6. And here, of course, Mariotti played g4. Do take a look at that video if you haven't seen it, because it's absolutely wonderful. But what Torch suggested here was the move h4, and you know, it makes a lot of sense. What is white's idea? Well, simply to play h5, march of the rook's pawn, and well, you know what can happen. Either you can use it to open up the h-file and attack the king, or you can move it to h6 to, well, still inconvenience the king and also push the black bishop into the corner, which can be very, very useful. So how should black react here? Well, you'll have a look. I'm going to put all the analysis in my light chess study, the one I'm using all the time now, so you can have a look at all of the analysis. The one thing I do have to point out is that if h5, then white is just going g4, Mariotti style, very, very strong. And the interesting thing is that the move d5, just as it happened in the Mariotti-Gligoric game, is actually very, very bad. It's put us 1.45 by the engines. And well, I talked about this before actually. That the classical way of thinking is that you meet a wing attack with action in the center. Action in the center, that's always good. And it's always really been thought to be a pawn break in the center, and you've got to do it immediately, quickly. But it's a lot more subtle than that. You know, I was saying that I think that the reason people were talking about it having to be a pawn break and having it to be done immediately is that they only had the Rai Lopez as an example. And so, you know, the sort of the general rules got deduced as a result of specific moves that you could do in that specific opening. But it's a lot broader than that, really. I think that the key thing about it is that, yeah, you do meet a wing attack with action in the center, but it doesn't have to be a pawn break. It can be, you know, all sorts of pressure in the center, not just pushing pawns there. And indeed, after d5, well, white plays e5, and this bishop is out of the way. And actually the knight doesn't have a good square. The engines are suggesting that this is the best, but this is not very pleasant. I mean, we're coming in with some stuff, and I don't think you're going to be surviving for long. So interesting, yeah, I mean, really interesting bit of strategy there, I have to say. b5. in principle, that would be a move that I would think about, because what you're trying to do, you're trying to put pressure on the center with b5. You're trying to play b4, undermine e4, and you're going to be able to bring your bishop to b7 to attack e4. And maybe d5 will be more dangerous when white doesn't have two pawns sort of clamping down on it. Only, of course, sometimes tactics can get in the way. And here actually b5, which is a very natural move for black players, for King's Indian players with a bit of a Benko bent to them, is met by e5. And there's a huge problem that the h1a8 diagonal is getting is going to be rather painful. And yeah, this is a very common usage of putting the bishop to e2 rather than developing the knight to f3, because you're going to be able to play bishop f3. After knight f3, bishop f3, you're just winning a rook. The engines say 2.76 for white, so it's completely winning. There'll be some random King's Indian counterplay, there always is, but this is just absolutely winning. I mean, I like it very much that two moves, d5 and b5, are just really, really bad for black, and not just a bit, really bad. So knight c6, that's the best move, aiming for the d4 square, and we keep on going with h5 here. And now black's got a few different possibilities. b5 is not so bad, but the engines still quite like it for white. I mean, you can do all sorts of things. This was Stockfish's line against Torch. Knight b5, knight takes e4, bishop f3, d5, takes, bishop takes e4, rook e8, rook h7, rook d8. This was Stockfish against Torch, I think, wasn't it? Or am I? Yeah, Stockfish against Torch. Well, completely bananas somehow. There's other stuff as well for white. But I mean, imagine your opponent having to work these sort of things out. It's not going to happen, is it? The interesting thing is that if d5, then we go e5 again, and this is just as bad. And the really delicious thing is that if you go knight e4, we can just take, play h6, bishop h8, and then queen d8, rook d8, bishop e3. And this is completely winning for white according to the engines, because this bishop is completely shut in, blocked in by these pawns, blocked in by this pawn. If you go g5, we go g3. You never break that blockade. Black's just playing a piece down. Completely winning, like +4 or something. So, I mean, there's lots of places where, natural moves for black just end up being a complete disaster here. So I really like that. The best line that black can play is knight d4 here. And what black is aiming for is now to play b5 and bishop b7. Black is reacting in the center to that wing attack, but in a good way, and not just thoughtlessly just pushing a pawn there. And it's needed, but it does mean that that this is necessarily a bit slower than that counterplay. So white gets time to build up some kingside attack. So takes, we're not going to play h6. We're going to use the march of the rook's pawn to open up the h-file. And now white's got a couple of interesting ideas. Queen d3 was looked at by both Torch and Stockfish, and the idea is that the queen's coming over to h3. This is scary. I mean, I definitely would say that an opponent who's never seen this before is going to get pretty worried about it. I mean, the queen's coming over. You can also just play bishop e3 and then castle queenside, and then knight f3. I mean, there's a lot happening. Again, a black strike in the center is just met by e5, and the queen's attacking g6. So panic is definitely going to be punished here. Black's best move is to go e5 takes, knight g4, queen h3. We're threatening queen h7 and, well, various stuff coming in. Black, the engines find a draw by repetition here with knight c2 check. Important to get the king going to d2. You can't go to f2. That's the problem because of knight f2. So the king has to go to d2, and then you're no longer able to bring your bishop out to h6. That's one of the key things. And then this was the engine draw by repetition. Knight e5, queen h7. We go knight h3. We've got rook f1 here. We've got knight g5. Knight takes a1, rook f1, king e8, queen g7. Takes, bishop h3, knight d5, we're coming in, we got knight f6 check as a threat, But then actually this is a draw by repetition. Would you believe it? Knight f3 check, check takes, queen f2, queen f1, king f4, queen f1. Draw by repetition here. But okay, you know, if your opponent makes it that far, then I think you just have to shake his hand and say, well done, sir. But yeah, some crazy ideas. As I said, you don't need to remember. I put lots and lots of the engine games that I ran in this line, you know, in the light chess study. But I mean, it's pretty gorgeous, right? It really, really is nice. So that's queen d3 as a possibility. The engines were looking actually also at knight f3 here. So just challenging the knight on d4. And then black's really got to play very concretely here. You know, once again, d5, e5 is pretty strong here for white. If you go knight h5, I'm going knight d4, and then well, I'm going to have bishop h5 takes g6. But what black can get away with here after knight f3 is the move knight h5. The idea being that after knight d4, we go c takes d4. So we're attacking this knight on c3. We've also got some threats of knight f4, you know, sort of winning that pawn there. So white plays bishop h5, and now black's got to be brave and play d takes c3. Bishop takes g6, and now c takes b2. So it actually looks like, oh, you know, is white really going to have very much here? Because you know, if you go queen h5, this rook can get out of the way. We can even take on c1 and go rook takes f4. Queen h7, king f8. We've got no attack on the dark squares really, so maybe black's going to be fine here. But actually there's this gorgeous draw by repetition here, which is bishop h7 check, king f7, and then bishop g6 here. What's the point of it? Well, obviously king g8, bishop h7 is a draw. If you go king takes g6, I check there, and bishop b2 check, and you can imagine this is going to be rather sad. If king e7, I go bishop takes g7. And if you try and get out of the way here, if you try and play king e7, I go bishop takes b2, and bishop b2, rook h7 check, king f6, queen g4 is terminal. Going to go queen g5 checkmate, basically. You can cover g5 for the moment, but I'm threatening e5 and then queen g5 later. So you're not going to be able to survive that. White is just mating very shortly. So the best move that black has got there is to play the move king g8 and then bishop h7 and bishop g6 check with a draw by repetition. But okay, I mean, that's one draw by repetition there with after 12 knight f3, but you've also got this very dangerous move queen d3 as well. And yeah, I mean, this is you know, to even get there, get within the sniff of a draw by repetition, black has got to play, you know, find this move knight c6, knight to d4, calmly putting his knight in the center whilst you start hacking away at his king side. I mean, it seems like an extraordinarily dangerous line for black to me. And yeah, building on Mariotti's genius back in 1969, his game against Gligoric, well, Torch in 2024, you know, sort of find something that's virtually never been played. And well, Torch and Stockfish show how it's got to be done. Really, really nice play. Do take a look at it and maybe use it in your own games. Could be a very unpleasant idea for a King's Indian player. So there we are. Hope you're enjoying all this stuff, delving into old games and then finding lots of new stuff with engines. Love doing it. If you like the series, why not give a like, subscribe to the channel, and take a look at my new books. Tell your friends, and otherwise stay watching this channel. We've got lots more stuff for you. Thanks very much for watching.